I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. The Supreme Court says New York City's ban on worship services in public schools can stand. I'll get reaction from a lawyer with the Alliance Defense Fund. Plus, it's been 70 years since the day that will live in infamy, and survivors of Pearl Harbor go back to Hawaii to remember and reflect.
There's only about a half page in a history book about Pearl Harbor, so our youngsters don't understand what really happened.
And just ahead of the holiday, one Queens parish celebrates the season with Christmas lessons and carols.
It serves as a reminder to all of us who are Christians about the birth of Christ and the gift that God had given us. So if nothing else, that's what we really should be getting from that.
Well, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Is it a case of freedom of speech or the separation of church and state? Well, this week, the nation's highest court said it would not take up an appeal of a 16-year-old case challenging New York City's ban on churches holding worship services in public schools. The Bronx Household of Faith sued the city over that policy, saying it was a matter of equal access to public schools. A three-judge panel had earlier ruled that allowing worship services in city schools could be seen as an endorsement of religion. Well, the Alliance Defense Fund represented the church in court and said in a statement that the city's policy discriminates against churches by not giving them the same access as other groups. Alliance Defense Fund Senior Counsel Jordan Lawrence says churches and other religious groups should not be excluded just because of the religious nature of their speech. And Jordan Lawrence joins me now by phone from Washington, D.C. Mr. Lawrence, thanks so much for taking some time for us. Really appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
Well, first of all, give us a little background on this case. I understand that the Bronx Household of Faith has actually been meeting in public school, holding their worship services there for some time now.
Well, yes, the Bronx Household of Faith has been in existence for 40 years, and in 1994 they first requested to meet in a public school, and they were turned down. And they filed a lawsuit in 1995. So this case has been going on for a good number of years. Now, the policy banning private worship services in the public schools of New York City has been in effect for decades. And the reason why churches have been allowed to meet for the last 9 years is because of an injunction that the Alliance Defense Fund was able to win on behalf of Bronx Household of Faith in 2002. And that has been in effect basically ever since, until the Federal Appeals Court overturned it last June, and then the disappointing decision by the Supreme Court not to hear the case. So at some point early in 2012, the religious groups will be leaving the New York City public schools unless the state legislature or the city council steps in to change the anti-worship policy.
Right. And now, just for clarification's sake, this does apply only to worship services? I mean, other activities by churches and religious groups are still allowed, just not worship services per se, correct?
That's correct. So they could have a learn English as a second language course. They could even have a Bible study. And strangely, the Court of Appeals and the city said they could have a meeting where they have singing, where they read the Bible, they have preaching, they pray, just as long as they don't call it a worship service, which is really, really odd.
That sounds a little bit like a worship service to me. I don't know. That's that is.
Yeah, what a private group calls its meeting, how it labels its meeting, should not determine their First Amendment rights.
Well, the city also does not allow what they call partisan political groups to meet on school properties, but it says that does not equate to discriminating against their speech. So why make the argument here that the Supreme Court's decision not to take up this case amounts to discrimination against churches and religious groups?
Well, excuse me, this has really been a battle, I think, to understand whether over private speech versus government-endorsed religious speech. You know, if you have prayer by a school teacher, that's a very different matter than an empty school building on the weekend and allowing private groups to use it. And what the government accommodates, the government does not necessarily endorse. And I think New York City, unfortunately, says, well, if we allow church services, we're going to confuse the kids, that it just looks bad, that sort of thing. And I just think that that's wrong. I mean, they've got probably 10,000 groups or 10,000 uses in almost 1,200 school buildings. And I don't think people are going to be confused. This is a facility that's available to the community. This isn't some building that's been, hijacked for religious purposes or something like that.
Does the Alliance Defense Fund, and you in particular, do you see this as an attack, the Supreme Court decision not to take this up and to let the lower court ruling stand? Do you see that as an attack on religious freedom in general, as part of maybe a larger effort, directly or indirectly, to discriminate against religious groups today?
Well, I think that it is the Supreme Court's action was a surprising lack of effort to respond to a lower court defying its precedents and treating religious speech in a way that the Supreme Court has said the Constitution does not permit. So that was surprising that they did not step in. Now, they said the lower court decision said this was permissive. So what we are concerned about is whether other school districts around the country are going to take up and copy the policy of New York, or whether New York City is going to continue leading sort of a one school district parade. Outside of New York State, there are we're hard pressed to find any school districts that have a similar policy of banning worship services.
Quickly here, what is next for these religious groups after this case has gone really as far as it can go? Where are they going to go now?
Well, the Alliance Defense Fund is exploring whether there are any other litigation options to happen here with this. But what's also been interesting is the very strong reaction that we're seeing by the local citizens of New York City, who did not know that their school districts had such a policy and are appalled by it. There's been an effort by a city councilman who's also a pastor named Fernando Cabrera to overturn this policy. And now it may have to be done at the state legislature, but he already has sympathetic allies in Albany who want to work for this, to overturn this, and to give religious groups and churches the same access, equal access to meet in the facilities that all other community groups have.
All right, well, we'll continue to follow it, as it appears we haven't heard the last of this case. Jordan Lawrence, Senior Counsel with the Alliance Defense Fund. Thank you so much, sir, for taking some time out for us. I didn't mean to get you all choked up there, but I appreciate you taking some time out.
Yes, I don't know what happened there, but thank you. I appreciate it.
It's all right. Thank you so much for your time. Well, there's more currents ahead. A Catholic group takes to the airwaves to target President Obama. We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, a seasonal celebration at One Queens Parish with song, dance, and prayer. First, though, let's have a look at today's headlines. Girls younger than 17 will not be able to buy Plan B or the morning after pill without a prescription after all. Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius overturned an FDA recommendation that would have allowed the pills to be available over the counter. In a statement, Sebelius says FDA data is not sufficient for making the Plan B emergency contraceptive available to younger teens. Plan B is currently available to girls 17 and older. Walter Reed Medical Center is rescinding a ban prohibiting family members from bringing Bibles and other religious materials to wounded soldiers. The policy says no religious items are allowed to be given away or used during a visit. Now, speaking on the House floor yesterday, Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King called the policy, quote, the most outrageous affront. A spokesman for Walter Reed, though, says that the policy has been rescinded. It will be rewritten to make clear its original intent, that is, respecting the religious and cultural practices of all the patients at the center. Well, meanwhile, a Catholic grassroots movement has taken to the airwaves to target President Obama on religious liberty issues.
Dear President Obama, can I ask you a question? Why are you trying to force my church and my
This ad from the website CatholicVote.org features a young girl presenting a message to President Obama, questioning him on a number of issues, including same-sex marriage. Catholic Vote's Director of Communications, Joshua Mercer, tells the National Catholic Register that the ad was prompted by the administration's decision to require most private health plans to cover contraception and sterilization without a copay. Now, Mercer says that the ad, which aired yesterday on Good Morning America in the Pittsburgh market, was aimed at letting voters know where President Obama stands on the issue. The ad also will air on cable stations throughout Southwest Florida. Well, turning now to Pakistan, a 25-year-old Christian man there says he was falsely accused of blasphemy. The man says his employer, who is Muslim, saw him burning paper and accused him of desecrating the Quran. The man was set to appear in court today. Fidesz news agency reports that extremist groups have staged demonstrations saying that the man must be punished for desecrating the Islamic holy book. In Pakistan, the crime of blasphemy carries the death penalty. Well, meanwhile, an organization that helps suffering and persecuted Catholics around the world has been elevated to the status of a pontifical foundation. Aid to the Church in Need says it will continue as it did before, helping wherever the Church faces hardship or persecution. The new designation means the organization is now under the umbrella of the Vatican. The Vatican spokesman says Christmas is a reminder of our duty to help children in need. In a commentary for the Vatican Television Center's program Octavia Diaz, Father Federico Lombardi cited the document from the African Synod, which included mention of children who are aborted, orphans, and children forced into labor. According to Lombardi, the Church knows she must work for all of these children. Well, from Belgium, an 81-year-old priest who was suspended for living with his 85-year-old girlfriend says he will take his case to the European Court of Human Rights. Reports say the suspension will have little effect because the priest is retired. An expert says the priest does not have much of a chance in his case, though, because freedom of religion laws have priority over the right to marry. Well, back in this country, an 80-year-old priest on Chicago's South Side was viciously beaten in his church rectory earlier this week. Reports say two masked men dragged Father Daniel Maletti from his bed and beat him and demanded money. The attackers made off with $600. Father Maletti suffered broken ribs and injuries to his face. He was reportedly recovering at home. The priest is known in the neighborhood for his efforts to fight poverty and violence. Meanwhile, Reverend Billy Graham was released from a North Carolina hospital yesterday. Graham was hospitalized for 6 days while receiving treatment for pneumonia. His doctor said Graham had a good response to the treatment and that the popular evangelist would also receive special care at his home. In a statement, Graham said he was grateful for the care. He was looking forward to seeing his home decorated for Christmas and spending the holidays with his family. Well, people in Rhode Island crying foul now over their governor's decision on what to call the state's Christmas tree. Reporter Catherine Sotnick has that story.
Hundreds gather in the State House Tuesday for the tree lighting. The majority of those there upset that Governor Lincoln Chafee is calling it a holiday tree instead of a Christmas tree. Many in the crowd sang Christmas songs over the choir to protest.
It's a Christmas tree. You know, how can you celebrate Christmas without a Christmas tree? The Christmas tree has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years.
That's a Christmas tree. You know, as far as I'm concerned, political correctness has gone too far.
The governor says he's trying to be inclusive.
I think if we're going to have a tree here, it should be a holiday tree. It should be secular.
And while Governor Chafee only made a brief appearance during that tree lighting from the balcony, he told us earlier in the day that he was not changing his mind.
For those that are not Christians, it's a difficult time when the state or the government is supporting a religion, and that's the whole debate that has occurred over these years.
I think the governor's wrong. I think he's wet. I pray for the governor. I pray that somebody gets to him, whether it's anybody that can get to him. And he's a progressive, and he's an ultra liberal, and I just don't think that agenda is what we need in this country right now.
2, 1. The Catholic Diocese also fired back Tuesday night, along with Representative Doreen Costa, who both held their own separate Christmas tree lightings. The church lighting was held at St. Patrick's Church, where Catholic school choirs and hundreds in the crowd sang Christmas carols out in the rain.
We're disappointed that the governor decided to eliminate the word Christmas from his celebration. Obviously, there's a reason we do it in December. Glory to
That report from Catherine Sotnick. Well, an auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese for Military Services will spend Advent and Christmas with troops overseas. Catholic news agency and EWTN News report Bishop Richard Spencer arrived in Afghanistan this week. Spencer will spend Advent and Christmas with U.S. troops and NATO troops as well, and also State Department staff members. He calls it a very humbling experience. Spencer will celebrate the sacrament of confirmation for 6 U.S. soldiers during his visit. And New York Archbishop Timothy Dolan celebrated a funeral mass today at St. Patrick's Cathedral for Auxiliary Bishop Patrick Sheridan. Sheridan was the retired Vicar General for the Archdiocese of New York, having been named to that position by Cardinal John O'Connor back in 1987. Cardinal Edward Egan renewed that appointment not long after he was named Archbishop in 2000. During his time in New York, Bishop Sheridan also served in numerous other positions, including as Chancellor of the Archdiocese Seminary System. Sheridan died last Friday. He was 89 years old. Stay with us. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, survivors of Pearl Harbor go back to the site of the infamous attack 70 years later. Welcome back. As then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt put it, it was a day that will live in infamy. On this day, 70 years ago, Japanese planes bombed the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. More than 2,400 Americans were killed, close to 1,300 more wounded. The attack led to U.S. involvement in World War II.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Well, despite the widespread death and destruction on that day, many U.S. servicemen were honored for their brave efforts. Among those honors bestowed, 15 Medals of Honor, 51 Navy Crosses, 53 Silver Stars. Now, in 1991, Congress authorized a Pearl Harbor Commemorative Medal for all U.S. military veterans who were present at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked. And several of those men are still alive today, but as we hear from CNN's Greg Black, they are a dying breed.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Those words, spoken 70 years ago, rang true then and still today. The attack on Hawaii's Pearl Harbor plunged America into World War II. The memories of that day are etched in the minds of those who survived.
It was just a tremendous amount of explosions, then the smoke, and a little later on, the fire on top of the water.
The bombing was a surprise early on a Sunday morning, and when it was over, some 2,400 American lives had been lost.
I was so shocked I didn't really have much of a feeling. But afterwards it haunted me.
Today is the last time the anniversary will be commemorated with the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. The group is disbanding at the end of the month. With fewer survivors still alive, those who are left worry that the reality of the attack will die with them.
There's only about a half page in a history book about Pearl Harbor, and half of that half page is a picture of the Arizona. So our youngsters don't understand what really happened. They don't understand that freedom isn't free.
CNN's Greg Black there, and sorry to see that group is disbanding. Well, stay with us. There's much more currents ahead. When we return, school's in at Sacred Heart. Parishioners get lessons on Christmas at their second annual Lessons and Carols Extravaganza.
People were so excited last year that they wanted to make it bigger and better. It was just beautiful.
Well, finally tonight, Sacred Heart Church in Cambria Heights, Queens is known for its music programs. One of the hallmarks of the parish is its gospel choir, which brings a different sound to the Catholic Mass. This past weekend, they were part of a seasonal celebration at Sacred Heart, an evening of lessons and carols. But the night was not only about the music, there was also acting, singing, and prayer at a gathering you did not want to miss.
Christmas is a time for reconciliation. We celebrate the birth of our God in our midst. And because of that, beginning at Advent time, we begin to focus our attention on that day. Light shines out of darkness, and this is what we have here. The lights, the celebration of lights, the Christmas lights, and these decorations here help the people to let them know that this is the season that we are about to celebrate the birth of our Lord.
Well, this has become our annual Lessons and Carols and Tree Lighting Ceremony. And last year was the first time. So, I mean, of course, it was the first time. Everyone was very excited. But this year, it's even bigger because people were so excited last year that they wanted to make it bigger and better. And so it was just beautiful. God is great.
What the Lessons and Carols do is that it serves as a reminder to all of us who are Christians about the birth of Christ and that the gift that God had given us. So if nothing else, that's what we really should be getting from that. We may miss out on some of that during the course of the year, but at this special time of the year, we need a reminder.
The idea was to come together to sing and praise God. This evening, we had something a little bit different in that they enacted some scenes from the prelude to the birth of Christ and his actual coming into the world. And it just really gave everybody an opportunity to participate and sort of realize, make real the spirit of Advent and anticipation of the birth of Christ.
It's really a wonderful, wonderful idea of getting together, celebrating. It really helps you feel like Christmas. Like somebody said to me, if I die tonight, it will be complete. My Christmas is made. And I really have to say I feel that way too.
Well, my favorite part was when the whole choir was singing together. That was really grateful. It's a great thing that God can put us together to glorify his name. That's a blessing for us. For all the people in Sacred Heart, we are blessed.
I really enjoyed the play because I was a part of it and we worked so hard. We did a lot of practices, getting so close to them during rehearsals and the actual performance of the play. I really enjoyed that.
I was baptized in Sacred Heart and I came here to this community and I'm embraced by Sacred Heart. And I've been here for over 35 years. So this keeps me going.
When you really take time to reflect and meditate upon what does Christ coming into the world mean, it has a much richer significance for you when the day actually comes. We are one people, even though sometimes we don't sense it or feel it, but this was an opportunity for us to sense and feel the unity of humanity.
An absolutely beautiful time of celebration there. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Coming up tomorrow, it is all about Mary on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. We'll take you to some celebrations around the diocese, and we'll put out into the deep with Bishop DiMarzio to learn more about Mary, so you don't want to miss it. Be sure and visit us online over at currentsny.net. You got plenty to see there, including links where you can watch previous episodes of the show that you may have missed, all right? The address again, currentsny.net. You can also connect with us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter as well. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.